Hi everybody, Shuko here with part 1 of the White Mage Guide. For part 1, we're going to cover the basics, so that would include starting sets, what the spells consist of, merit setups, and things like that. And going into other guides, we'll get into a lot more macro setups, more bits, equip sets, and so on. But first, let's talk about why would you want to play a White Mage in Final Fantasy XI? And my first reason I would say is it's one of the most necessary jobs in any large group content. It's one of the few jobs that can handle the healing role, and without healing, people die pretty quickly. It can be very stressful being responsible for keeping everybody alive. But one thing I would say is a lot of times when people die, it's not always your fault. That's something you got to repeat to yourself a lot as your healer. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. So before you panic about it and get all worried, you don't want to have to think about, oh, it's everything's my fault when people die. Let's go over some of the basics. White mages are blunt users of clubs and staffs, and they can exclusively use white magic. Now, with some jobs, you can access some other magics as well, but that's a separate conversation. We're just going to stick with the basics of white mage today. So that said, thanks for joining me today, and let's move over to Shu. So I'm here on my white mage, and I've prepared rather for us 4 sets that I would like you guys to look over. Now, it's unusual for me to talk about gear first, but I'm assuming some people watching these have gotten some gear already, or are familiar a little bit with gear, or watch some of my videos. So we're going to start there first, and then we'll talk about spells. So this first set I've pulled up is what I would consider a basic healing set. It winds up capping on a lot of the things that a white mage can do, and it's pretty easy to get gear. And we'll explain why each piece here is important and basically where to get it. And I'll try to add some notations and text as we go. So for the weapon, the Queller Rod is something that you can get from Domain Invasion, which is the dragons that come every 10 or so minutes through the Esha zones. It's 200 points, and you can also get it by fighting a notorious monster in Guy's Feet. It's a lot harder to get that way, but it is possible as well. It's the White Mage exclusive club, and every job gets one of these essentially. The reason that this one is really good is it has Cure Potency 2, the regular cure potency category can only go up to 50. And once you get that to cap, the only way to get it higher is with this kind of thing or some other special effects like weather and stuff. We won't get into that today, though. And then all of these weapons can actually be augmented. So with the augments, I picked specifically Path D, and that adds more healing magic skill, which adds to your cure potency as well. And then Cure Potency Category 1, and Cure Spellcasting Time, which is essentially fast cast for healing. And they all stack together properly. Then on the shield, I have Cure Potency 3 and Cure Casting Time 5. Now the Sword Shield comes from Orb Battle, but you can also buy it from the auction house for a pretty affordable price. In the ammo slot, and this one's variable, you're pretty much just going for fast cast or something with some damage taken protection. I use the Sapience Orb. It has fast cast too. That isn't always the best choice. There's other things you can get like the Incanters Stone and whatnot from the auction house. This is from a Guy's Fate tier 2 fight. It's free, which is why I put it up here as an option. In the head slot is the Vanya Hood. This whole set comes from a T1 Guy's Fate in the very first zone, Esha Zeta. And this set is wonderful for mages to have, and as a healing set, it's very powerful. This comes with Cure Potency 10 on its own, and then if you augment it with Path D, it winds up getting more haste on it and Fast Cast 10, plus some MP to boot. So that's accessible from that. I would highly encourage getting that. For the neck piece, this is where probably the most expensive starting piece you would need. And this is a crafted item. These job-specific necks are pretty difficult to make. Thankfully, you would only need the normal quality because what you're really looking for here is the erase +1 and other things. But the Cure Potency 5 here also helps when you're trying to get a Cure Potency set together. This earring that you'll see, the Mendicant earring, is Cure Casting Time -5% and Cure Potency 5%. So even more adding to the stack. You're trying to essentially get Cure Casting Time or Fast Cast combined to 80 and Cure Potency to 50. The Roundel earring drops from, I believe, Abyssia, or you can buy it from the auction house for a pretty affordable price, and it has Cure Potency 5. The Venicum earring comes from Legion, which I talked a little bit about in the guild guide. You can buy it with points or the auction house, and it does quicken spellcasting 1% or 2% in Ambuscade. Quick cast is something that will proc and make a spell happen instantly and then have no recast. It's really great to use with raises, but it's also pretty good for a curing set too. Especially if you're not alternating between a fast cast set and then a curing set if you combine them. The Labatch earring comes from the Garuda high tier battlefield. It has Cure Potency 3 and Quick Magic 2, with a little bit of enmity down. The Telchine gloves come from Alluvian Skirmish and have Cure Potency 10 on them. It's something that you can actually get with wings, or you also will get it randomly from rewards. It's actually something you don't even really need to fight very much to get. And these can be augmented. I like to augment mine with enhancement duration. So I like to get the entire set for an enhancing set, and then fast cast too. They're kind of programmable in a way. For the body piece, I go for the Empyrean set. And unfortunately for White Mage, you really should get the entire set for this. But if you're only going to get a few pieces, the legs and the body are the most important. And then maybe even the head. Going down, the Ambuscade Cape. You hear essentially enhances much like the body, will enhance Aphias Solus. This is the stone skin that takes effect after a cure. White Mage gets 2 stances, Aphias Solus and Aphias Misery. You're usually going to be in Solace for the stone skin effect. We'll talk more about Misery later. The Whitful Belt has Fast Cast and Haste, and then Quicken Spellcasting 3%. So that's for a total of 6% on this set. You can actually get it to 10, but you really want to make sure your Cure Potency is capped first, then it's a Fast Cast. For the legs, the Ebers Pantaloons, that's part of the Empyrean set. And keep in mind, you don't need to have these at +2 like I have. This is part of a process of upgrading, but you really want to get them at least to 109 to start, and even really 119. On the feet, the Vanya Clogs, same like the Vanya head, they drop from a tier 1 Guy's Fate monster. Really good for a Curse set, but we'll talk about that in a separate video. And they come with Cure Potency, and then augmented as well. I also have a little bit more Cure Casting Time and Healing Magic skill. So this set in particular winds up capping Cure Fast Time. It winds up capping Cure Potency 1 at 50. And it winds up having a 6% chance of an instant cast. So what you would do is you would switch into the set for the cure for 2 or 3 seconds, and then right back to your idle set. So moving on, let's talk about the idle set. Now, for this, I put a bunch of various pieces. This don't follow this particular set as a Bible guide. The other one, yes, you'd want to get a set exactly like that so the math works out. For this set, this is really just giving you some guidances just to piece together from what you have. The Mafik Cudgel comes from the Titan high tier battlefield, and it has physical damage taken 10. It's equipable by all jobs. It's a very good club. The Genmei shield comes from Genbu 2.0, but you can even get the Genbu shield from original Sky. It's physical damage 10, and the Genmei version blocks even more efficiently because of the shield skill and the counter and successful block plus. But either way, you're really just trying to get physical damage taken. So if you pull hate and you get hit by monsters, that you're not dead instantly. And keep in mind that white mages can also proc a shield block. For ammo, one I would suggest that doesn't cost anything, but there also is the Staunch Tathlum that you can buy from the auction house. But the Crepuscular Pebble from the Shinryu High Tier Battlefield has physical damage taken, or actually pure damage taken, -3. So that's a good one to keep in mind. The Swordy Earring that comes from Swordy, when augmented, does have damage taken. The Etalation Earring has magic damage taken and resists silence. There's also a Unity Earring called the Okinawa Earring that has damage taken -3 when it's augmented, but that does cost a lot of money to get it there. There's a lot of farming, and it even takes away some of your MP, but it's also a strong consideration for the slot. In the neck, I have the Sybil Scarf. If you're a Winder citizen, you actually get Refresh +1 from this. But if you're not, another one I would suggest would be the Loricate Torque for its damage taken and defense plus properties. And that actually drops from the Sovereign Behemoth UNM, so you would need some friends. In the head slot, I have one of the Ambuscade sets. Now you can combine these pieces to get Refresh, and even with the ring as well. But the Inyaga set, it doesn't have any damage taken directly, but has massive amounts of magic evasion, more than almost any other gear in the game. And you will straight up evade magic and evade ailments when you wear this full set sometimes. In the body, I have a Yanmo Coraza. Now, again, these are just suggestions. The Yanmo is the other set that white mages can get from Ambuscade, and this is more their melee set with lots of double attacks, store TP, and damage taken. In the hand slot, I actually have an Empyrean piece. Once you get it up to this point, it starts to get damage taken. This particular piece has damage taken -10, which is very powerful. Now, in the ring slot, this is an incredibly expensive piece, but I wanted to mention these. The Stakini ring is crafted from goldsmithing, and it's one of the only ring slots that has Refresh. Something totally worth saving for. In the other slot, I have a defending ring. This is a pretty rare item to get from the King Behemoth, but as you occasionally will find savory shanks, it's nice to try to get one of these, because it's all jobs, and oh man, you'll use it in so many sets. In the feet slot, I have the Niame. Now, this is an Odyssey set, and you could actually use this entire set if you want it as an idol. It would keep you very safe. But you want to try to mix in Refresh as you can, too. Just trying to throw you suggestions as to what to keep in mind to keep on a white mage so you don't die when you get pool hate. Another piece I like to suggest to people is the Aswidi pants in the leg slot. This one drops from an Eft in Bibiki Bay UNM. And it winds up having Refresh +2 if you're in the #1 UNM like Slivy, and Refresh +1 even if you're not. So that's incredibly useful to have. And it's really good for summoners too, by the way. A belt that I like to keep on as an idol is the Fucho no Obi. This comes from Delve, and it's the Marjorie Revive one. And it doesn't have to drop directly from it. You can actually spend points to get this if you run through the zone with friends. You do need to at least have 2 other friends to enter this one, though. The latent effect is Refresh +1 when your MP is under half. So pretty much giving you Refresh when you really need it. And then lastly, I would mention the Ambuscade Cape again for an idol. You can give it 5 damage taken, but I would suggest going with 10 physical damage taken, because that goes higher and gets you that 50 cap that you're trying to get to. Now, keep in mind, Shelf 5 will actually give you 26 magic defense. So you only really need to get to 24 for magic. This is where the physical going higher is kind of nice. You can piece it all together and get a full 50 then easily for both. The next set I'd like to talk about is an erasing set. Now, one piece in here I don't expect anybody to get to, but I have it as a reference. But the first thing I'll point to is the Mending Cape. This comes from Wildskeeper Reeve, and it enhances Divine's Caress. Divine Caress is an ability that we'll talk a bit about later, but it strengthens your abilities when you do Nas. So if you do Divine Caress into, like, say, Silena, removing a silence, you'll wind up making the person who you hit more resistant to silence for, like, 30 seconds. The Inyaga Juba I just have here for fast cast. At +2 has fast cast 14%. You don't need a lot of fast cast because of the Divine Benison, which gives you a natural fast cast when trying to cast a Na spell. Going back to the Empyrean hands again, you'll see these have Divine Caress +4, which, pairs. And then the Empyrean head. Yeah, like I said, the Empyrean head is really important for white mages. This has Divine Veil +24. Now, Divine Veil, what that does is makes your spell area of effect for a Na. So there's a 24% chance that your Na spell will area of effect. You can actually even spam it a couple times, and it'll probably proc after a couple casts. So this is very useful for when somebody's spamming area of effect, paralyze, or silence, or things like that. So really, this set here, these 4 pieces, you would be at cap, and you could spam Na spells super fast. But the one thing I have in here that I want to mention is the Yag Rush. It's the Mythic Club, and it's incredibly hard to get. But one of the reasons it's so legendary is it always makes those things AoE. It makes Divine Veil happen every single time. That said, let's talk about the last set I'd suggest for people to go after if you're new to trying to do this type of thing. And remember that all these sets would also apply to other mages as well. Well, except for some of the clubs and things I said that are white mage only, but most of this would. So for the enhancement set, we're going to start here at the feet. I've talked about every other Empyrean piece so far, and let's talk about the feet. The reason these are good in the set is it has enhancing magic skill, but also Auspice +17. Auspice is a spell that gives your allies subtle blow, and that makes it so the monster does less special attacks, meaning you have less healing to do, and it's very useful. The other pieces in this armor set you'll see are the Telchine. Now, I've talked about the hands, but the big thing, the reason you would want the rest of this set, is you can augment it with enhancing magic duration plus between 1 and 10%. And that is excellent. So you pair all this together and you have haste lasting twice as long. You have auspice lasting twice as long. Your bar spells go over 10 minutes. It is wonderful. So that's all the armor. You've already seen me talk about the Stikini rings refresh. They also raise all magic skills +8. So that includes enhancing magic. In the earring slots, we have the Mimir earring, which has enhancing skill +10. That's from Domain Invasion for 600 points. I wouldn't worry about that right away, but it is something to work towards. The higher enhancing skill you have, a lot of spells are directly affected by that when you're casting buffs. The Andela earring comes from Vagary and has enhancing skill +5. A little bit of haste in the hasty pinion when your sets come up short. This particular shield is really hard to get, but I wanted to mention it because it's the only thing that does what it does. The Amarapi shield comes from the Omen Boss K, but it has enhancing duration +10%. So I wanted to mention it. The Gata is a club that comes from Racing Jima bosses, but you can also buy it with Domain Invasion points, 800, and this can be augmented to have up to enhancing duration 6. In the cape slot, you'll see that the Fee Follette cape has enhancing magic skill 9, but you can actually even augment this to have fast cast 10. I use this as my all mage fast cast cape. In the belt slot, I use the Embla Sash, which has fast cast 5, sublimation +3. Separate video, we'll talk about that. But enhancing duration +10%. So this is an excellent buffing piece. So between all of these, this winds up getting my healing skill close to a little over 500 on White Mage when I'm sub-Scholar. And that winds up making all my spells have maximum potency when I'm casting buffs and last a little longer than twice as long. Now, there's more you can take this to, but this is something I would say to go after last. It's the last priority. If you're using White Mage, you would want to do Curing Set and Idle Set first, then the Erasing Set, and then the enhancing set, and then from there expand and grow. And we'll talk about more sets in further videos. But next I'd like to talk about the merit setup. In merits for White Mage, there's 2 categories for all the jobs. In White Mage's first category, when you're new, what you would want to do is cure cast time to max. This gives you curing fast cast 20, meaning those other sets will actually work really well. And then bar spell effect 5. This makes your elemental resistance spells a little more potent. We'll talk about bar spell sets a little bit later, but essentially I would say you want to use your Empyrean set because that adds even a further bonus, plus enhancing magic skill. Once you've gotten fast cast figured out though, you will want to switch cure cast time over to regen effect. Going into group 2, Martyr, I have 1 point in. This is a great emergency heal that works instantly. You lose 25% of your HP and instantly restore a bunch of HP to the target. You got to be kind of close, but it's a lifesaver when timed right. Devotion does the same except for MP instead of HP. I usually will hit a tank that's run out, like a paladin who's low, so you can start pulling hate with cures again. Or a black mage that's struggling with MP after a big set of bursts. Then Animus Solus, as I've talked about before, is this cure skin ability, and you want to max that out. That winds up making sure that the cure skins have as much as possible on them. Animus Misery is an ability that we'll talk about a little bit now. So if you're meleeing, you can switch to that mode, and as you take damage, it'll increase the potency of the Cura line of spells, and it'll also make the Banish line of spells do more damage. And you can even use Asuna to more stronger effects where it will remove more ailments and remove more at once. It's not something you're going to be using often, but when you need it, it's good to be aware of because sometimes you can't avoid getting hit by ailments. And then all of a sudden, Animus Misery shines. But these would be the merit setups that you would want to use. So we've talked about basic gear sets, and we've talked about merits. Let's go over a quick talk about the spells. In White Magic, you get the basic cure lines, goes from Cure 1 to Cure 6. I personally call Cure 3 the bread and butter cure. That's the one you're going to want to stick to the most. Cure 4 can still be turned area of effect with Sub-Scholar Accession. So sometimes I'll use that to give an area of effect cure to another party if things are getting dire. Cure 5 and Cure 6 are unique to White Mage and have way less hate, but they also cost a lot, but they're really, really good to use in a panic or to create a large stone skin on somebody. Then next, White Mages get the Curaga line, which goes from 1 to 5. Curaga cures for massive amounts, but is very expensive. Usually you want to use Curaga 1 to wake people up. Curaga 3 is a good bread and butter balanced cure. Usually heals people for enough with a good potency set. And Cure 5 is your, oh crap, everybody's in the red and I need to fill them up cure. Then the Cura line is the one that's linked with Animus Misery. It's self-targeted. You can't target anybody else with it and then hit an area of effect around them. It will be targeted to you. But there's a time and a place, so be aware of its existence. Full Cure you only get with job points, and it takes all your MP and completely cures the target and removes most of their ailments. I suggest against using this unless it's an emergency. You have to have at least 60 MP, I think, to use it, and then you'll have no MP. Be aware it exists, but it's rarely needed. The Raise line and Arise will bring targets back from the dead. Arise and Raise 3 restore most of lost XP. Raise 2 and Raise 1 restore some, but it's good in a pinch to keep in mind, especially when you need to get people's bodies up quickly. Re-Raise will put it so if you die, you'll be able to come back to life. They have the same effect as the other raises, and then Re-Raise 4 acts as like a self-arise, where you're not weakened as long. It's half of a weakened timer compared to the other ones. The Nas spells all wind up removing various ailments, and it can be kind of complex about how you'll wind up going about using them and what monsters use what. You want to remember what each do. Poisona removes poison. Paralina removes paralyze. Blindna removes blind. Silena removes silence. Stona removes petrification. Viruna removes plague and virus. Cursna removes doom and curse. Sacrifice will wind up pulling ailment off of somebody and then put it onto you. Frankly, I only tend to use this to try to get zombie off of people, which is also known as HP curse. which it prevents somebody from being healed. And even then, it doesn't work on that sometimes. It won't remove amnesia. It won't remove certain ailments. Asuna is a self-targeted that will remove area of effect buffs based on what you have. So, like, let's say everybody got hit with attack down, and you also did. You could use Asuna, and it will remove the attack down from you and everybody in AoE range. And if you're in misery mode, it'll actually remove up to 2. And there's even gear that you can get through Dynamis Divergence stuff that will take it up to 6. Moving on to some damage spells, the Holy 1 and 2 line are very quick casting, very expensive light damage spells. The Banish 1 through 3 lines are single target light damage spells, but they also have a bonus enfeeblement to undead that will wind up allowing other weapon types to do more damage other than just blunt, or in the cases of ghosts, any kind of damage. Banishka is an area of effect version of that. Repose is a light-based sleep spell that winds up working really well on undead or a lot of things, honestly. Flash is a light-based blind spell. It doesn't last very long, but it very much lowers the accuracy of the monster. Protect and Shell are both lines of spells that are buffs that last for a half hour plus, and the 5 line is the one you'll want to be casting at 99. And Protectora and Shellra are the area of effect versions of those. You'd want to start those or cast those at the start of any serious battle. Blink is a single target casting spell that puts up 1 to 3 shadows on you. If somebody tries to attack you, there's a chance that the shadow will take it instead. Stone Skin is a self-target spell that essentially does the same thing Solace does, but it's a much longer lasting buff and puts up 2 to 700 or so HP of protection where you won't take any damage. Aquaveil is a spell that when it's cast on you and you take a hit while casting a spell, the spell will still go through unless you're stunned or knocked back. And eventually it wears if it protects you from enough melee hits. Haste is a magical-based speed-up spell that will speed up your attacks, and oh man, everybody loves Haste. Haste 1 is 15% magical haste. The bar line spells of elemental spells, Barfire, Blizzard, Era, Stonera, Thundera, and Watera, wind up adding an area of effect resistance. Now this is complex, but it winds up resisting tons of things. Like for instance, if you cast Bar Blizzera on yourself, everybody that's hit with it will be more resistant to getting hit by Paralyze. Or Barfira will help people be protected against amnesia. These are very important to keep in mind, and if you know who you're fighting, you can prepare ahead of time to make sure there's less headache throughout the fight. Then on the flip side, you have the ailments. Bar Sleepra, Bar Poisonra, Bar Blindra, Bar Silencer, Petra, Vera, and Amnesia. These are, if you do get hit by the ailment, you'll wind up having it affect you for less long time. I've talked about Auspice a little bit, but it is a subtle blow buff on the party. And with the gear, you can even get it up to 25 total. And if it's on you and you're meleeing, you'll actually get accuracy bonuses. And if you're in misery stance, you'll actually get end light damage on your weapon. It's not something you'll do often, but something to keep in mind. The regen line goes from 1 to 4. Now, unfortunately, we don't get regen 5 like Scholars, but regen 4 is still powerful, and you can get up to a 4 to 5-ish or so minute lasting potent regen on the party. Especially if you're sub-Scholar, you can area affect it with a session. From there, these spells are sub-job spells of Scholars, where you can affect the weather and increase your potencies of spells. We won't get into that today. Erase is a white mage spell that winds up removing pretty much anything that the Na spells don't. It doesn't remove everything like Amnesia, but bread and butter removal spell. The boost spells, you can essentially area effect raise everybody's stats, and with a high enhancement magic skill, you can get up to 20, plus 20, I think, on everybody's stats, but you can only have one of these up at a time. A lot of times you'll find yourself doing boost Vit or boost Strength, sometimes boost Dex. From there, white mages have access to various teleports. You can't use these unless you've been to them ahead of time, but they're nice to know about. Navigation spells like Invisible Sneak and Deodorize. And then a couple enfeeblement spells like Dia 1 and 2 and Diaga. These are enfeeblements that lower defense and will also do a damage over time of light. Now keep in mind, if you're trying to sleep something, you wouldn't want to use these. Then the enfeeblement slow, the opposite of haste. Paralyze, which essentially has a chance to prevent something from happening. I believe it's like a 10% chance, and then Paralyze 2, it goes up a lot more. Silence prevents magic casting if it goes through. Great on mages if he can land it. And if you can't land it, Addle would be the next best thing. And this is like slow for magic casting. It makes people take a lot longer to cast their spells, and it makes their recast a lot slower. So it's very good to have. And then from there, I just have sub-jab scholar stuff. So we're not going to get into that today. We're going to talk a little bit about sub-jobs now, though. So in sub-job options, one thing that you would want to keep in mind, I would say the best sub-job is sub-scholar. It has sublimation, which lets you stay awake. It drains some of your MP and puts it into a HP and puts it into a secret MP pool that you can pop later. And it has the storms, which lets you change weather, and you can do a lot of things like cure more, elemental accuracy. And then it has the helixes, which you won't use too much. The dark sleep, dark dispel, and you can area of effect buffs and cures and things with the session. You can lower cast times with other stratagems. It's incredibly powerful and worth taking the time to learn. But other sub-job choices that you should be aware of on healer would be Red Mage. Red Mage gets things like Bind and other things like Phalanx, and so that's something to keep in mind. And they also have the job ability Convert. So every 10 minutes, if you run out of MP, you can just swap one heal and you're back to business. So a lot of times I suggest newer healers try to sub Red Mage until they're more comfortable. The last starting one I would worry about in this beginning video is sub Black Mage. Now you wouldn't want to do this a ton, but in large events, sometimes you may need to keep in mind Tractor. Tractor pulls a dead body over to you. If you can't raise them where they're at without getting a bunch of hate, Tractor can be very useful if there's not a Dark Knight or a Black Mage present, and so sometimes being able to sub Black Mage is super useful. The other thing to keep in mind with sub Black Mage would be being able to warp people and warp yourself around without having to worry about a ring. And then the Elemental Seal job ability can make things like Stun land very effectively. While we're on that topic, Stun is useful, but those are the only reasons you would probably be subbing Black Mage. So we've talked about the magic, we've talked about the merits, we've talked about job stuff. There's only one last thing I'd like to talk about in this beginning video. We're going to talk about my main page of macros. I'm not going to get into any other pages yet. We're just going to talk about the starting page, what one macro will look like, and why I have it positioned this way. So for my Cure 3, I have that as my main cure, like I said before. It goes into my Cure Potency set, MA, Cure 3, within parentheses, T is target, weight 2, and then back to my Idle set. So that is pretty good setup for you to be able to work with the sets I described. And then I have Cure 4, Cure 5, Cure 6. In Cure 6, I sneak in a Divine Seal. We'll get to that in a bit. Martyr, Arise. Sometimes you need to get somebody back up quickly. And in there, I sneak in a Celerity. A Celerity lowers the cast time in half and the recast time. That's a job ability for Scholar, though. Devotion. For this, I have Sublimation or Convert, depending on what sub-job I'm using. Curaga 3 and Curaga 5. Sometimes you gotta wake people up or big cure resets and stuff, so I want those quickly accessible. Then on the other page, I have all the Na spells you would need and 2 job abilities. So Erase is the main one you'll be using the most. Kursna for Doom and lots of other things like that. Paralina, Poisona, Stona, Blinda, Silena, Viruna. Those are all the Na spells that you'll usually be using. Sacrifice and Asuna I have on a separate page. Na Plus is for Divine Caress, and I'll hit that first before I hit some of these sometimes. It is a 1-minute recast, so use it liberally. And then for Area of Effect, I have this set with a Session. Now, Session has to have Light Arts up, so just in case I forgot to activate that, I have it set as a secondary page, so I can mash it twice in a panic in case. But yeah, Session is very useful. It turns most things AoE that a Scholar would be able to cast. Now, that being said, these are the macros for my main page. I'll flash over to these other ones. My bottom page, I have Buffs and Enfeebles, And then at the top, I have a couple of my bar spells and the Asuna and the Sacrifice. But this is a basic setup. There's a lot more that you can do and set up for melee, and if you're an emergency tanking role, etc. But I just want to give everybody a basic idea how to set up a basic white mage in this first guide and just get started with it. Lastly, before I get going, let's talk about the job abilities that white mage gets. Benediction is their 2-hour, or I guess I would call it SP now. You can get it down to 45 minutes now, so it's not much of a 2-hour. But it winds up around you doing a full cure and removing all ailments except like Doom. And you can only use it, every 45 minutes, but in a panic, it's great to use. Once you start to get close to Master, it'll even refill a bunch of MP. Divine Seal is something you use every 10 minutes. It will double the power of your next cure, or it will make your next Nah spell area of effect, kicking in Divine Veil, essentially. Martyr and Devotion we talked about a little bit already, but these are on 10-minute timers. Definitely something to keep in mind for emergency refills of those resources. Light Arts and Dark Arts are Scholar abilities, so we'll talk more about that in a later ability. But that mode is something to keep in mind. Stratagems, again, Scholar stuff. Sublimation. The two modes for White Mage are Solace and Misery, and you can switch between them, but really you want to be staying in Solace for that Cure skin. Divine Caress we've talked about a little bit already, but that's the good Nah boosting spell. And the last two abilities I like to talk about I haven't mentioned yet would be Synchro Sanctity. This is also on a 10-minute timer, which sucks, but what it will do is it prevents 90% of the damage of the next magic affecting thing that will hit everybody in an AoE. So if you use it at the right time, you can stop most of the damage of some of the most damaging moves in the game. But because it's only 10 minutes, you got to be real specific with the timing. It may just eat a Dia, so it's complicated, but wanted to be aware of it. The last ability we're going to talk about is Asylum, and this is the other SP 2-hour ability for White Mage. It hits the same range as Synchro Sanctity, about 10 yalms around you, so you want to make sure you aim it right. But instead of protecting against magic damage, it protects against Dispel, specifically. It prevents you from being dispelled, or everybody, for about 30 seconds. And then to top it off, it does raise your magic evasion, so you may even start to evade certain ailments, making it easier to heal in intense, quick fights. Something very useful to keep in mind. That being said, I would just say one last other thing to keep in mind is you don't have to use a club and a shield. If you have good staffs that will get your stats to where they need to be, do so as well. And we'll talk about more of that in further videos. But I just wanted everybody to be aware that the best way I think to do it is using with a shield. Because when you pull hate, you can survive a lot stronger. But that being said, let's switch back. So one thing that I wanted to talk about exclusively that's above all of the other gear that I've talked about so far is the Eber's Pantaloons. Now, there is an alternative of these that you can get, and I'm going to put it up on the screen now. And that comes from the Puppet and Peril high-tier battlefield called Safahir plants. But assuming you're going to want to eventually try to get these and the rest of the Empyrean set. And the reason that you would want these is because of the returning MP per cure. Now, I know 3% or so doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually goes higher. And it's a lot more than it sounds like. A cure 3 is almost free if you're properly curing somebody. Now, granted, sometimes you're just giving them stone skin and losing MP. That's fine too. But this helps you keep your MP pool strong for long durations. And I wanted to mention this piece specifically. It should be one of the first pieces you go after if you're starting White Mage. Now, one other thing we're going to do before we end this video is we're going to go over a boss fight, a kin fight specifically, and I'm going to talk about some of the things that I do throughout the fight as we heal. Okay, so we have the video up. Let's start that. So Jin, by the way, I think I said kin, but I'm on White Mage here. We have a full alliance for this event. And And I'm trying to focus mostly on my party first and get the buffs up. I already have Protect and Shell on most people, so I actually started with Auspice. And then I'm putting Aura Storm on myself, which gives me a light weather effect. And that's going to help my cures be more potent. We'll talk more about that in another video, though. Then I'm casting an Accession to make my buff AoE and a regen 4, so that it affects everybody. Barfira to help with Amnesia. Bar Amnesia. And then from there, boost Strength to try to help the DPS. Now, unfortunately, I must have missed Shell on my Ranger, and they're asking for a Shell. Let's see if I notice in this one. I think I'm still putting up other buffs. Yeah, Stone Skin. Sometimes I get really focused when I'm putting buffs up. A Fly to Solace. Oh, okay, there we go. I put a Shell up on them. Everybody runs in. Now I want to make sure I stay 15 to 20 ohms away, so I'll try to angle myself right and face it. I look to the person taking the most damage, which in this case would be Zoro. He's tanking. I target Jhin. Make sure everything's going well. And then I know that Jhin has a move that does lots of damage, and it's coming soon, so I gotta get ready. Everybody takes the big AoE damage, and I get ready to start curing. It's also a hate reset, so hate will get a little zonky here. It already killed a couple people in the other parties, but my party's alive for now. It can be hard to heal this many people. But there's other white mages helping too. Everybody's back up, but Jin's almost ready to go again. 50%. Gotta stay real busy on this one. This is a busy healing match. So I got ready. In this case, the Paladin helps AoE cure that party, so I start trying to help everybody else in the other parties. Oh, looks like some people were still dropping. But that's okay. They're already punching him so hard he's almost already dead. But here comes the next 0 hour. And he's dead. So with good healing, you can actually start to ignore certain mechanics if you're strong enough to keep people alive through them. And that's just a quick little demo of what it's like to heal in an alliance. I just wanted to thank everybody for getting through this. We're going to be doing this in a couple parts, but for this part 1, I definitely wanted to cover the basics. One last thing I'd point out is I'm going to have little notations and stuff through, so I hope you're watching, but even if you're just listening, I hope I helped you out. In the next video, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the equip sets and the macro setups and how specifically they work, and some of the more advanced equip sets like Kursna set and so on. But thank you very much, everybody. If you made it this far, I hope that you like and subscribe, and I hope to see you guys on some of the next videos, and I hope to see everybody later. Take care.